Okay, so we're going to look at symbiotic relationships. So in this picture here, we have a heart, and it belongs to a dog. This dog is now deceased. The reason the dog is no longer alive is because of all this stuff here that looks like spaghetti, because these are heartworms. Okay, heartworms are transferred to the dog by a mosquito as eggs, which then go into the dog's circulatory system and end up in the heart where they hatch. They obtain nutrients and moisture and warmth from the dog. The dog is the host. The heartworm is a parasite, and this is an example of parasitism. Okay, over here, the clownfish. So clownfish live in the ocean, and they live in sea anemones. Okay, so here are our two organisms. The clownfish obtains energy. The clownfish eats food and it's, but the problem with the clownfish is because it's brightly colored, it's likely to be predated. So what it does is it sticks around the sea anemones because these have stingers. So if you go along and you touch one of these, you'll get a sting. But because clownfish are adapted to living in there, they are immune to the stingers. So what happens is the clownfish gets protection from the sea anemone. The sea anemone is not hurt, it's not harmed. It's this relationship between the two of them is very good for the clownfish, but for the sea anemone, it's kind of neutral. It doesn't hurt it, it doesn't harm it. That is an example of commensalism. When one organism gets something from the relationship that's positive, like the clownfish gets protection, and the sea anemone doesn't really get anything from the clownfish, but it's not harmed by having the clownfish there either. That's commensalism. Here we have, I don't know whether this is an alligator or a crocodile, right? But in its mouth we have something, and I know there is a proper name for this, but I'm going to call it the dentist bird because that's what I always learned it as. The alligator gets its teeth cleaned, which is very important for an alligator because if you've got lots of teeth, you don't want them getting infected or getting them hurt. And this bird that's in here cleans the teeth, so it's good for the alligator. The dentist bird here, it gets two things. One, it gets to eat all the food and the scraps that are in the alligator's teeth, but it also, you're not going to mess with a bird that hangs out in the mouth of an alligator. So it gets protection as well. When everybody is happy and we get positive relationship from both of them, that is an example of what we call mutualism. Okay, so it's two happy faces. Down here, we have ticks. Ticks are not good news for dogs, cats, or any other animal that gets them, including humans, because they can carry disease. The tick will suck the blood of the animal that it's attached to and deprive that animal of the material the good stuff that's in the blood. So the tick is a parasite. The cat or dog or whatever is the host. Obviously great for the tick, gets a steady supply of food. Not good for the host. And so this is an example of parasitism. Okay, over here we have a shark, and here we have a type of fish called remora. And what the remora fish do is they swim around underneath the sharks, and sometimes they can attach themselves to the belly of the shark, and that's a good thing for the remora. It's kind of got two positives. One is again, protection. The other thing is sharks are really messy eaters. And so when they eat bits of food and particles come out of their mouth, and all these little fish down here can eat it. Again, good for the remora. What does the shark get from the remora? It gets nothing. It does not. Get this in your head. These fish do not clean the shark. Okay? Shark Tales was not accurate. The movie was not accurate on that when you look at the whale wash. Okay? So these things here, they're just basically getting a free ride off the shark. It's good for the remora fish. It's neutral for the shark. It's not good. It's not bad. And so again, this is commensalism. Okay? Good for one, neutral for the other. On these ones here, so here we have an eagle, and the eagle has built its nest in the tree. Okay? The eagle has a nice safe place. The nest, the tree, not hurt, not harmed. Again, this would be an example of commensalism. Okay? Now, another example of commensalism is this one. This thing here in East Texas is referred to as a cowbird. It is not a cowbird. It is an egret. A cowbird is, this is an example of why we need a standardized naming system, because we call this a cowbird in East Texas. Everywhere else in the world calls it an egret. Okay? It is not, it is an egret. That's its actual more appropriate name. And here we have cows or cattle. Now what everybody thinks is that this little dude here gets up and picks flies and ticks and stuff at the cattle. It really doesn't do that. Okay? What happens is this. Whenever you have a pasture where you've got cattle, they produce cow patties. And if you've ever looked at cow patties, you'll see they've always got bugs and flies all over them. And if you ever walk through long grass, you can also see all the flies being churned up. As the cattle walk through the pasture, they disturb the grass and they make like a little cloud of flies all around them, which the egret just plucks straight out of the air. It's a bit like going to Golden Corral. The cattle provide an all-you-can-eat buffet for the egret. That is excellent for the egret. It gets a steady supply of food without even having to look for it. What do the cattle get? Nothing. Do they get hurt or harmed? No, they don't. And that's why any pasture you look at right now, you will see, where there's cattle, you will see an example of commensalism. This one here, we have a beetle, okay? And inside the beetle, you've got something that looks a lot like maggots. They are, in fact, a type of wasp. And the proper term for a maggot is a larvae. Okay, what happens is the adult wasp inserts part of its body and injects fertilized eggs inside the beetle. Those eggs stay there until they're ready to hatch. When they hatch, these larvae basically eat the beetle from the inside out. That is terrible for the beetle. It is awesome for the wasp larvae because they get born with a steady and readily available supply of food for them to eat. Again, this is a good for one, bad for the other. The beetle is the host, the wasp larvae are the parasite, and this is parasitism. Okay, moving along. This one we know, any insect, honeybee, bumblebee, even a hummingbird, which obviously is not an insect, and a flower. The flowers have grown to adapt. The reason they have bright colored petals is to attract insects and hummingbirds. You know hummingbirds love red stuff. That attracts them, and down here at the bottom of the flower produces a sugary liquid called nectar. The bees and the hummingbirds use that nectar as a source of energy. Okay, so that's good for the insects because they're getting food. It's even better for the flower in some respects because pollen that the flower produces, because the flower is the reproductive organ of the plant, the pollen that the flower produces, that gets transferred from one flower to the other. It gets caught up in the hairs on the insect's body, or the feathers if it's a hummingbird, and it gets transferred from flower to flower, and so the pollen gets spread, so the flower gets to reproduce. Excellent. If it's good for both, that is mutualism. Okay? All right. I'm coming down to this one here. I'm going to stop after this one. So what we have here, and this is the magic word here, we have something called beneficial bacteria. Okay? Anything that is beneficial is helpful. And we have a human digestive tract. Okay? Or digestive system. So why is this good? Well, it's good for the bacteria because they get a nice, warm, moist, safe place to live. They get a steady supply of food, which they get from our digestion. We digest the food, they absorb it for energy. So that's great for the bacteria. Why is that good for us? Several reasons. One, we need bacteria to help digest some of the food that we eat. That's one thing. Bacteria also can produce certain vitamins that we cannot get in our diet, like vitamin K. So they make vitamins for us, which we absorb and use to keep us healthy. Another positive thing. Beneficial bacteria also, when we make red blood cells, which erythrocytes, which carry oxygen around in our body, red bacteria, once they die, will break down the dead red blood cells, because they only last about 6 weeks, and they will release the hemoglobin, which is the protein that's inside red blood cells that absorbs oxygen, that attaches to oxygen. The iron compounds that are in that are what we need to recycle so we don't run out of iron. So we get lots of good things, which is why beneficial bacteria is mutualism. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with the different symbiotic relationships. If you want to know about this one, you can come and see me.